Hello, this is Krista Farova. Welcome to another episode of the Strategy Skills podcast. Our podcast sponsor today is strategytraining.com. If you want to strengthen your strategy skills, you can get the overall approach used in well-managed strategy studies. It is a free download. You can go to firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. And Firms Consulting is firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. And then if you're currently updating your resume, you can get McKinsey and BCG winning resume. It is a resume that got offers from both firms, and you can get it as a free download. Go to firmsconsulting.com/resume PDF. And today we are speaking with Cristina Alaimo. Cristina is an assistant professor, research in digital economy and society at Lewis University, Rome, Italy. She holds a Ph.D. in Management, Information Systems and Innovation from the London School of Economics and Political Science, UK. Welcome, Cristina. So great to have you with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me. It's great to be here.
So Rome, what is it like to live in Rome?
Well, it's fantastic. Rome, it's an eternal city. Sometimes not that contemporary, but surely is eternal. So, and you have good food, and also fantastic stuff to see. And I am enjoying my time here. Also because as an Italian, it's also nice to come back. But to be honest, I also love to be European in the sense that I travel a lot, and I've been living. Well, I've lived kind of almost 15 years in London, which is another great city that I love. So, and all of this, I think, makes me appreciate each place for its own characteristics. So, but that's great. It's great to be in Rome, yeah.
You've had a solid academic career progression. You spent 10.5 years at the London School of Economics, doing your Ph.D., becoming a research fellow, and then progressing to become an assistant professor research at the current university. Can you tell us a bit about your academic journey and what inspired you to focus your research on the social and economic implications of data?
Certainly. Well, I first arrived to London. I think the whole social media platform data was taking over, and it was a very interesting moment because you could see there were startups. It was a very lively, environment where lots of startups were doing experiment, basically. To bring new idea to the market. And they were and I'm talking about different sectors. I studied, for instance, fashions and retailing, but there were startups everywhere doing almost everything. But I started to understand that there was a common thread linking all of these different experiments, despite they were belonging to different domain, or what was back there, and it still is, perceived a different domain. So for instance, a startup in agriculture is still perceived as an agricultural business. Startup in fashion, it's fashion industry. Startup in PR is PR industry. But what I was seeing is that as these startups were adopting data and a data-driven idea of business, and they were experimenting with data-based platform, they couldn't be considered so much, or as it was before, a sectoral business. So an agricultural business or a fashion or a retailing business, because increasingly they had something in common. And what they had in common was that data was at the center of their operation. And that transformed the way they made business, the way they thought about business. So I started digging on this. And, that was something that really changed my orientation as a researcher. I thought that was very interesting. I wanted to know more. I saw this as sort of a shift, really, in the way things were done. So that was, I guess, something that really oriented my research interest. And I think, kickstarted my career in the sense that it was really, really at the center of my studies, my research, but also my teaching, and up until now. So I was for many years at the London School of Economics, then I was at Surrey Business School, and then I came to Lewis afterwards. So UK, then Italy.
Cristina, so when you started observing all the startups and how much the role that data played in making business decisions, and you started doing research and work in that area, do you remember your initial hypotheses and your initial understanding and how it changed? What are some of the most surprising things that you uncovered once you started studying this topic?
Yeah, I have, I think, two things that pops in my mind immediately when I think about it. The first is that reaction of colleagues, let's say senior colleague or staff, that when I was talking about the importance of data and how data were going back to organizations and company life from the everyday activities of people, they were like, what do you mean? I mean, what does that mean? I mean, we study organizations, we don't study social media, retailing or social media, I don't know, whatever, traveling blogs or whatever. And I was saying, no, look, but today, what's going on is that data have exited the organization as we once study, IT in organizations, for instance, right? Information technology and organization. Now the important stuff is happening outside organization, and a new kind of organization is emerging that is able to take over all of this data, produced by everyday interaction and setting, which are not traditional, and making new businesses out of it. So that is like a sort of, when you have I can visualize this moment almost, which happened more than 10 years ago. Because I think there was a collision, let's say, between two worlds. So one world, which was the old world, in which there was like information and communication technology, ICT, and this was studied in organization, and it was a support to organizational operation. And what I was seeing, instead, a new wave was coming, or of a different kind of organization, a different kind of firm, where instead data were at the center, like everything was, these organizations were doing everything around data. Data was not like a side, a small office in the basement doing ICT and stuff, but was really at the center of their own thinking and operation.
We're speaking about data. How would you define data?
So that's a good question, because the majority, I think, of perhaps company practitioners over out there, but also data scientists and geek and artificial intelligence people, they often think about data either as input to big systems. So like, for instance, all the talk around artificial intelligence, see data as the input that enter into these big, machines, and then something else that is an output. Or they think about data as resources, but a very kind of, let me say, sort of with an old vision of what resource is, such as, for instance, I can harvest data out there because data are already there somehow. I can collect data, I can gather data. If you hear all these verbs, they all have this in common, like the assumption that you can take something that already exists out there and you can sort of work it out and make something out of it. We don't think in the book, and we make this very, very clear, that this is a productive way to approach data. And instead, we define data as a cognitive artifact, and I will tell now a little bit more what we mean about that, as a medium of communication. and also as economic resource. But, we kind of enrich a little bit and build on this resource idea. So cognitive artifact, because we see things in different way through data. So we understand the world in different ways. Think about what do we know today about climate change. It would not be possible without this enormous quantity of data that now we are able to collect. The model that we are able to build out of this data, but these data, they have made possible to understand a new phenomenon, well, in different ways. So that's what the cognitive artifact means, the power of looking through data like lens and see new things in the world. And therefore understanding new things, and therefore the ability to act on this thing. Because of course, the consequence of seeing new things is that you can act on them, you can organize, you can manage, you can produce, you can, activate resources and so on. So in this sense, something that is linked to this cognitive artifact idea is also the fact that they are the knowledge base of modern business making, but also of modern politics, if you think about it, or, modern communication, the news, what we see. And the second definition that I gave was, in fact, media of communication. Why? Because not only we construct knowledge and communication out of data, but also we use data to communicate. So what we are now doing is made possible because of digital data. So it's not just that we construct knowledge with data, but also through data. We pass each other knowledge, so we communicate. And then, of course, the third is like economic resources, but intended is not in this term like, I harvest something that is already there, but rather as the possibility of constructing something because I know very well how to deal with this cognitive knowledge and communication aspect of data. So if you think about, I don't know, all these kind of data intensive industries, I mentioned before social media or, like the platform business, is a business that comes because these data are produced, arranged and used in new way, and therefore create a new business. So I guess, yeah.
Thank you for that definition. Cristina, so if we think of leaders that are currently listening to us or watching us, and their organization currently primarily using data as input or basically resource, you go, you harvest data, how can switching the way they view data to how you defined it as a cognitive artifact, as a medium of communication, and also as an economic resource, in practical terms, what would it change? How would it play out differently for them?
Yeah. So to treat data, these imply a shift in the mindset, right? Because it's really what visually, if you visualize, data as sort of almost an administrative component of organization, and you can visualize these IT people like working in some offices and stuff. This is like, let's say, the old way of thinking about data. So if someone is listening to us that still has this sort of organization or still work in this organization, I would say to them, switch mentality and consider to put data at the center of your organization. So visually, to let these people, working on data out from the small office and instead build a team around and with these people, which means that organizations do not need only data scientists to work and thrive on data, but rather a number of resources of expertise, knowledge, artifact, cognitive artifact of profile that instead can work on this different aspect of data and make them the central resources, the central object of work of organization. So create interdisciplinary teams that all work on these different aspects of data and put them at the center of the organization rather than relegating them as support, let's say. By support, I mean, when you do, for instance, marketing and you think that you use data, for instance, to communicate, and just do marketing with that, communication, or you use that for accounting, or you use that's all good. But what I'm talking about, it's instead putting data at the center and consider what kind of product I can make out of data today. What kind of new services I can construct if I leverage on existing data, and what new data should I produce in order to, really construct innovative data-driven services. So this is different. That's a mind shift. The practical implication of what I'm saying, because it considers the richness and the potential of the data of opening new worlds. So the comprehension of new things, knowledge about new things. And this means for an organization the possibility of offering, of course, innovative products, innovative services.
If we take a major consulting firm as an example, could you talk us through what some of the changes that could take place if they adopted your mindset, the mindset that you recommend in the book?
So, a major consulting company. And yes, I suppose that one of the things that, of course, major consultant company do is that to use data to support, to back up decision-making processes, or, for instance, their knowledge about a given situation. So they use data to support a lot of the stages or the processes through which a consultancy project normally happened, unraveled. But if you instead, I think, recognize, or let's say adopt this mind shift, then the idea of data here is to understand what else you can implement, or how you should change some of the stages of this consultancy project, or of the process itself, to accommodate the possibility of innovation the data trigger. So I go out and I have, I don't know now, a project into, for data intensive business. This means to accompany, this data intensive business in the transformation that they are supposed to have. So the digital transformation, by taking data and start applying to it a product-like mentality, right? Product thinking idea, product thinking approach, which of course I think by implication means to change the way you do things. So then consultancy, and a major consultancy cannot any longer sort of, do the step-by-step process that it was doing, but it needs to change a little bit the way it organizes its business, the way in which approach new projects.
Very interesting. And let's say if we take something like Harvard Business Review, for example, how could they use data differently if they looked at data the way you recommend in the book?
Look, we have seen this happening already, and we have seen newspapers, magazine changing a lot their business model, the way of doing business, because they transitioned from, let's say, a data poor to a data rich. Everything has changed for this business. That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, defined roles in organization. A writer, or a publicist, or a marketer, or an advertiser, each of them using their own data that can be, I don't know, customer response, or selling of advertising space, or readership, or loyalty program, or whatever, and each doing their own bits and pieces as part of an organization, in this case newspaper or a magazine or a journal, a scientific journal. What we are seeing now is that as data leave their back offices and become central to the organization, all these people need to talk together. They cannot any longer work with each with its own data, small, sort of sectoral data. They need to change the way they do business. And so journalists will talk more with, for instance, I don't know now, publicists, and they will gather in real time what's going on out there. And they will adjust, for instance, their marketing space. So the whole stage, all the stages of the process of, delivering a service or a product, in this case, article, all the organizational blueprint, the organizational chart, the organizational structure, all the single expertise, they are all reshuffled, redrawn out of the fact that now you have data at the center of organization. They are increasingly relevant and they permeate how companies do business in the way they continue to procure services and product, the expertise, the skills, role, and profile they need to do so, but also the real process of organizing. So how things are done inside an organization has changed a lot.
Do you feel that most organizations are looking at data in the way you recommend, where data is at the center? Or do you feel most organizations still see it as input and resource, but it's not at the center?
So there is a data, let's say, intensive a group, let's say, of organization or company, or I would say industries, where data really are the driving force of change. Digital natives, platforms, but also all this communication-related, content-related industry. If you think about newspapers, or if you think about even, movies and music. Music is something that we've studied a lot. Marketing, advertising, finance, they really are driving, very hard on the possibility and potentiality of data. Each of them in different ways, but we see that much of this industry have been already transformed in this respect. There is another, and I think, this is of course always to a matter of degree, I'm simplifying a bit, but there is another, let's say, bunch of organization or sectors that are more behind simply because they have strong path dependencies, which means they are very much sort of constrained by how things have happened so far. For instance, if you are, I don't know, like furniture, let's say, right? Or, you have a precise way of doing business. You have like, a supply chain, which is very formalized. So it's more difficult, what I'm saying, for this organization. It has been more difficult to do the transition, and perhaps they will do it in different ways. And some of them are doing it in different ways. However, what we are seeing today is that also this organization, also industrial organization, also agriculture, also sectors that are very much linked to the physicality, materiality of the product that they produced, but they have, historically, they have been historical sort of sector, car, for instance, car manufacturing. We see that also this company, also this industry some of them at least, are transitioning, putting data, for instance, at the center and trying to rethink their business, including their core business. So, for instance, with car, that's like the main example. You see that there are cars that are working really with data, and implementing these huge systems that you have now in cars that are data driven, offering new services. The host of sensors that can do lots of things, but also if you think about autonomous driving and all the innovation that is going around it, this is the classic and perhaps the most indicative example of what happens if you take an industry and then you shift it almost. You still have cars, but oh my God, how different they are from what we are used to, to think about or to see. If you put data at the center and you reshuffle a little bit the product and the way the product is made, in this case, car.
Cristina, and when organizations realize that they need to have data at the center and they start making this transition, what are some of the common mistakes you observed?
So some of these mistakes have to do with this embedded assumption we were talking about, because the shift is a cultural shift, right? It's not just, adopting a technology and therefore things will automatically happen. But it's a shift that implies, how do I rethink my way of doing business? How do I rethink the way I organize my resources? How do I rethink the product and service that I offer? This rethinking implies that you need to be ready and open to change. And, for organization, this historically has been very difficult because, we know that we all part of organizations and we know how, resistant they can be to change. So this, I think, is a common mistake that we have seen over and again, and this is something that we will see now that the wave of AI will reshuffle once again, way of doing business or the importance of data for organization. I think I would say that's the most common because it happens across the board. It is not, it can happen to a data-intensive organization. It has happened with Microsoft, or it has happened, with organizations that have been software, firm. So it can happen to technology-intensive organization, and it can happen to agriculture. There is no difference here in which sector you belong, and therefore you are constrained, or for instance, you are more prone to or more open to change. No, this has to do with how the leadership, the management, find the resources and the strategy to drive the whole organization toward change. So it's very complex. It has to do with a cultural shift, with a mindset, but also with an investment of resources, human resources, of course, economic resources, time resources, and with risk-taking.
And for organizations that will not get on board in time and they will not put data at the center, what are some of the greatest danger for those organizations?
Well, the main is, of course, to fall behind and to find themselves be not relevant any longer. Because falling behind, it doesn't mean, you fall behind because you are not relevant, because there is some alternatives. There is just, better. And these alternatives are not the same product made better, but it may be a completely different product. So I'm thinking about the example of Nokia and the iPhone, I mean, that's a perfect, I would say, example. So the competition has not come from the same industry, but it has come from a total sort of different industry that has proposed a product that has revolutionized the entire market. And the reason why this has happened, it was because the iPhone was not a phone. It was not a device to make and receive call only, but it was a hub, a platform that hosted app, and this app application through data and data work could give a different variety of services that the normal phone didn't have. So that, I think, is the most dangerous bit. So find that what you are offering is not relevant any longer, not because there is a product that is better than yours, but because there is an entire different stuff that make your product and your industry less relevant, less, less marketable, less contemporary. I don't know. So I think that's the most important bit that we have learned from the past.
For those of our listeners who are running small organizations, so some of our listeners, they worked at a very large organization, they were very successful, and then they went ahead and started something on their own. For example, a boutique consulting firm or another organization. A concern that they may be feeling right now, they hear you. They understand that they need to put data at the center. They even knew it before this conversation, but maybe this particular conversation now made them feel it's time now to actually make the change. But the concerns they may be feeling is, but how can I even manage all this data and collect the data and analyze the data in terms of actual ways of managing data, collecting data, and so on? How could you put their mind at ease, or what advice you could give them in terms of how they can start exploring how to actually, from perspective of actually doing it, how can they manage and analyze large amounts of data?
Okay, so one very practical idea that the book, the book is not like a practical book, but it's a book that offers a new ways of looking at what is going on in society and in the economy. But there are some implications for organization and even for a small consultancy firm. One is, do not rely only on the latest technology blindly, because that's a tendency, particularly if you, of course, are small. You don't know how to analyze data and you buy, the latest technology, but then you have it and you still don't know what to do with that. So that's what I was saying before. You need to find a cultural shift, a mindset, and that's different from just putting data at the center. Because putting data at the center is not having more data or having the latest technology or hiring data scientists alone. What the book opens up in terms of discussion is you need to look at data differently. And this is where we started from. If you hire only data scientists, maybe you find a slightly better way of looking at the data that you have, but you will not find what kind of new data you need in terms of sort of changing your way of offering consultancy service to other company. This comes from a cultural shift. This comes from the realization that data are products. So they have been made in certain ways. Their making is a process that should be taken care of. The data are not harvested out there. They are not ready-made for you to use. There are implications in how data are made that you should consider in order to use them better, in order to sort of innovate the way you use it, in order to grow your company and propose, I would say, a new way of doing what you already do, but also of doing new things. And that's the challenging part, because it implies, okay, I need to leave what I know and I can do and explore new territories that are not so familiar for me. But these territories, I repeat once again, are not only, okay, let's crunch more data and let's buy the latest technology and let's hire data scientists. They are instead, if I think about the data that I have as product, as complex product that come from a process which, is anchored to a cultural predilection, to specific technology, what do I learn from them? And can I change the way data are made in order to acquire better knowledge, acquire a different understanding on my own processes and my clients' processes? So, and what are the expertise, the experts that I need to do so? Do I need only data scientists, or do I need, like, I don't know, anthropologists, or do I need people that can exercise this, like, digging in data making processes and discover, oh gosh, I haven't considered that if I use this technology, I have a biased view of my client and I propose them only a narrow action point for their business. So perhaps I should instead go back and rethink what kind of data I use, what kind of technologies I use, how these data are made. So I don't know if, in the book we say rather than only a data science, we need a new social science of data. And I think that is very true even for business, even for small business. Think about data as product and unpack them and try to find out, how they are made, if you can improve that. What kind of work goes into data making in your organization? Or does your organization just rely on data of others? And if it does, how these others, partners, make data? And so this is the idea of a social science of data. An inquiry into these objects, these strange objects, these strange artifacts, these strange bits, that ask and question them, not take for granted the fact that they are there and we should use them to improve whatever. Is not enough.
Building on this and kind of going a little deeper into this topic, what are some of the unintended consequences or hidden bias that can arise when organizations rely heavily on data-driven decision-making, but not fully considering the social context?
Absolutely, that's a fundamental question. Because if you take this data as input thing, like you take them for granted without considering that they are made by you as organization or by others, then the risk is that you based your decision or something that may not be exactly relevant or significant for what you are doing. Or the risk is that you propose to your client, consultancy, or to your customers something that may be biased, or they may be narrower, then it may be, twisted, or they may be not accurate as you want to be, or not relevant as you want to be. Even worse, if there is opacity along the process and you do not take care of looking at and accounting for, so be accountable for the whole process of data making, data work, data transformation, you can find yourself liable or something you don't even know that is going on because you haven't unpacked these whole processes of data making and, this whole idea that data tell a story. But what kind of story do they tell? And if you base your decision on a story which is told for a precise point of view, which is based on values that are not the one of your companies, because they, for instance, embed racist ideas or old ideas that are not relevant in this world any longer, well, that's a danger. Can be a reputation danger, can be, a market danger. There can be various degrees of risks here, which of course are different from different companies and from the kind of data different companies use. This, of course, has different degrees of application depending on which kind of data we talk about. But in general, what I would say is that if you shift your mentality, and again, you think about data as this cognitive artifact, the idea that they tell a story, and stories are always told from a specific point of view. So in order to trust your data, you need to know the story. But you also need to know what has been the point of view that has been adopted in order to craft those data. So therefore, what kind of embedded assumptions or biases these data carry with them? Because this has a huge impact on organizations.
Very true. I wonder, how do you see the role of data evolving in the future? What are some of the challenges, opportunities might this present for organizations? What are some of the things leaders need to be watching out for?
Yeah, I think that data will become more central, even more central. And I think particularly with artificial intelligence and this new wave of artificial intelligence, we run the risk of having much of the data work hidden somehow. So what I was saying before, this danger, then these risks may increase in environments, companies, firms that rely a lot on artificial intelligence application. Because this machine, they crunch data, but they also propose new ways of working with data that remain hidden, black boxed, and they are very difficult to understand, even for experts, even for those who have built those systems. But if what we were saying before is true, like when you work with data, you work with view of the world, you work with particular assumption, you work with stories. Then if you hide a lot of how this story have been crafted, you may find yourself at the end of the funnel with a little leverage, a little control, and a little way of intervening on this data work of artificial intelligence. So I think we should, as a society, but as organization, as leader, watch out and be very careful in using and adopting artificial intelligence, but always try to be accountable and transparent. So make this data work traceable if you want. So as much as possible, of course. In some instances it's not always possible, but as much as possible traceable, so that I can go back and understand what is it that I need to change in order to have a different result. Or, and make these various operations accountable. So being accountable for them. Do not import only, a big black box, but try to, adapt it to your own business and build, sort of secure and accountable way to use it, and still being able to trace the data work back, so to say.
And building on this, you spoke about AI. What do you think the world will look like 5-10 years from now, given how fast AI is being developed and what it can already do? How much do you think it will impact how organizations run and how we do things as humans?
That's like $1 trillion questions. I'm not sure I can answer to that. But I can say something, which is, let's start seeing what is going on right now. And to be honest, even this, sometimes we're missing out, it seems, in the sense that there are already so many big things happening out there, within organization, but also in our everyday life. Like, so much has changed in our democratic institution, in our politics, in our education, system, in our healthcare system. So let's first really, go beyond surface of saying, if I adopt this, my productivity will increase of that. And let's instead start asking big questions, because organizations need that. Organization leaders, they need big questions. They cannot operate only on the assumption that if I move this lever, I will increase my productivity of this percentage point. New idea come from big questions and not simplifying what's going on because, it's kind of, let's say, is like the fastest course of action. So let's start with this. And let's start opening up a debate and a confrontation on what we think these technologies are doing, what kind of world do they propose, what kind of society do they propose, are we happy with that, how do we govern these technologies, and as society but also as organization, how do we participate to this discussion? That's very important for organizations. For a firm, for small firm, what kind of power do they have to participate in a discussion about the governance and regulation of this technology? What kind of voice do they have? And what are they seeing themselves? So perhaps to your listener, to your audience, this is particularly relevant because, I don't have a voice if I don't have big questions or, an overview or some ideas that I can play out um, with which I can sort of go back to my business and say, okay, no, this is bullshit. Or, okay, no, maybe this gives me kind of a different way of looking at what I'm doing. And effectively, this idea of governing data or governing AI, but governing it as what they are, as very complex artifact of cognition and knowledge. I should say my thing there. I should also participate to this debate. I think this and that, or I'm seeing this and that. So yeah, I guess that I'm not ready to answer, and I don't, perhaps I don't feel I can answer to what it will be or it will look like in 5 years or 10 years, because also there are so much changes, so many changes happening and so much going on and so fast. But I can certainly say that we can participate to this change. And I can certainly say that we do that only if we open up a debate, and the book somehow proposes this on the nature of data, their role for society and institutions, their implication for AI, and therefore, if we start discussing this and fostering participation to this discussion, maybe in 5 years' time things will be different in the right direction, also because we have started this discussion now. So I guess.
I agree with you. I think the challenge for many leaders is we have so much on our plate already that we don't have much capacity unless it is something we are part of and we're working on it. It's part of our something we oversee. It's very hard to find time to participate in discussions. But I agree that we should have a voice because it is impacting all of us, and it can be very beneficial or it can be also very damaging for all of us down the road. The last question I have from my side today is not about data. It is about habits or practices you personally cultivated that you believe have contributed to your professional success and impact.
Okay, so curiosity, habit of questioning everything. Perhaps this does not make me. No, but, I mean, like, that's what I am. Like, always asking questions, always try to find out what's there, what's behind, but also curiosity toward life in general. So, but the second thing, note writing. So one of the habits is handwriting and taking notes and having, notebooks, small, big, colored, whatever, where I can stop a second and think and write down stuff, and write down some of the book that I'm reading and taking notes, or podcasts that I'm listening to and taking notes, or simply drawing something. And, and then from time to time I go back to a notebook of like 2 years ago and I found something interesting, or something that helps me, and this I think has contributed very much to my personal and professional development. So, even in this fast pace time that we are living, stop a second and take a note or dedicate some time to handwriting, something, because this help a little bit the analytic process and making sense of what's going on. But it also gives you some material when you don't know exactly where to start back, let's say from a new for a new paper or a new book or a new project. You can still go back to your notes, and this for me has revealed as a huge let's say source of ideas and reflection. So perhaps these two things, I would say. Yeah.
And then making the notes, do you have different notebooks for different purposes, or do you have everything in one? How do you manage? Because you commit your thoughts to writing, but you also write down things you read about. So I assume there's quite a lot of different things. How do you categorize it so you can find it later?
I think usually I have only one for work-related purposes. So both like note-taking or readings, notes about books, and my own thoughts. They go all in the same, because this mix also generates new ideas. So when I go back and sometimes I read things that are not meant to be together, that's a recombination of stuff that can generate new idea, even if they were not meant to be like together. So but seeing them together, it makes me think differently about what I know. So then go back to this. For me, it's always like reflecting a little bit, but also changing what I know, changing perspective, and being a little bit more having food for thought, but also going back to the same food and see it or tasting it differently, because they are there.
I like that. It makes a lot of sense because the unexpected things are together, and then you can come up with better ideas from that. And how often do you go back? Do you have some practice? For example, once a week you review your notes, or how do you manage it?
No, it's an inbuilt process almost. So I don't have like a stage, but this is really part of my workload or work process. So I do have my notebook always with me, and sometimes I don't even open it, but it's always with me, so I can write down something or reread something as part of my the many things that I'm doing, thinking about this podcast, for instance, or writing a new article or reading the newspaper, and then this can generate either not taking or not reading, let's say. But it's really inbuilt. Then I don't have like a moment that I dedicate to that. It's really, really, really inbuilt in my workload, in my work process. So yeah, and I have it always with me. So it's like so that I can really support my thinking or offload my thinking, because sometimes it just liberates you, from a burden, let's say, or from something that you cannot express, and therefore you need to write down in order to express or understand better.
Very true. Christine, thank you so much. Any final words you want to share? And also, where can our listeners learn more about you, your work, find your book, anything you want to share?
Yes, thank you. So the book will be out on the 4th of June, but it's already in pre-order in all the big platforms, Amazon, iBook, and and also on the website of MIT Press, which is the publisher. So and just Google it, you will find it. We also have a page on the MIT Press website. We have a website which is called Data Rules. So be happy, very happy if someone wants to contact us or send us an email. We will certainly answer. And I think the final thought is this, let's say, encouragement to the mind shift around data. So I think that's the very core message of the book. So opening up a different discussion around data, which doesn't stop only to the well-known input slash resource, but he creates and he wants to create a new discourse around data, which is extremely relevant for society and the economy. The two things are not separated, they are together. So as we move forward in our understanding of the role of data for society and for economic institution, we can make better decisions, or we can change, the processes, the organizing processes, management processes that, rely on data, because we now consider data a little bit more, in a richer term, in a richer way. So the book proposes this social science of data, but this is just a way to open up really a debate that has repercussion on management, on governance, on regulation, on many things that directly or indirectly impact business and the work of firm. So let's talk about it. Let's discuss about it. Perhaps this is my last kind of advice or thought.
Thank you, Cristina. I really appreciate your time, really appreciate your work. I feel that we could have spent hours discussing data. There was so much more to go into, but I think we covered some very important points.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And I really hope your audience, some of them will be, moved to think differently or more about data and how important they are for our society and the economy. So thank you so much for having, helped this conversation and built this conversation with me.
Thank you everyone again for tuning in. Our guest today again has been Cristina Alaimo. Check out her book. She co-authored it with Jannis Kallinikos. It is called Data Rules. And our podcast sponsor today is strategytraining.com. If you want to strengthen your strategy skills, you can get the overall approach used in well-managed strategy studies. It is a free download. You can get it at firmsconsulting.com/overall approach. It is FIRMS consulting.com/overall approach. And you can also get McKinsey and BCG Winning Resume free download. It is a resume that got offers from both firms, and you can get it at firmsconsulting.com/resume PDF. Thank you for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to connect with you all next time.